Thank you. I want to start off just to talk about the shutdown a little bit. I promise I won't go on too long. But as a child that comes from a teacher and a retired FBI agent, I know what it's like to go through a shutdown. As a child that grew up in a household in Los Angeles, oftentimes we would struggle in my own household to, make ends meet because housing is expensive in California. Housing is expensive in Southern California, where I lived for 14 years before I moved to Florida in the middle of my freshman year when the FBI transferred my father. I just spent a couple minutes volunteering at Jose Andres' restaurant on Pennsylvania Avenue to help feed federal workers. And what I think a lot of people don't realize about this shutdown is these are not just 800,000 numbers. These are 800,000 families. I just worked with people to feed a family of 11 because the father didn't have enough money to come and pay for groceries. That is not the America that we should have right now. It is 2019. And this is one of the most bipartisan groups of government leaders in America and some of the future federal leaders of America. And one thing that I would encourage each and every one of you to do is continue your bipartisanship with the understanding that when you shut down a government, it's not just a political stunt. You are actively upsetting families. You are actively making children question where their next meal is going to come from. You are sacrificing over 1 million people's housing because many people face the risk of eviction right now because their rent is not being subsidized by the federal government. Primarily in zip codes that are oftentimes affected by gun violence that politicians don't like to talk about because either they don't live there or they just don't care about them because they don't see them as politically important. And what we have to do across America is come together as not just as Americans, but as human beings with the understanding that no matter where gun violence is occurring, no matter how many people are killed in an instance of gun violence, if you are a mayor and you're one of the many that get a text on your phone when somebody is killed in your city as a result of preventable gun violence, you need to care about that person no matter whether it's one person that's shot or whether it's 17 like it was at my high school, because ending gun violence in one zip code is not ending gun violence. Ending gun violence in every zip code for every person, no matter what they look like, no matter where they come from, is what ending gun violence doesn't need to look like. It's what it has to look like. As I'm sure many of you have future plans for Congress and the federal government, I hope you continue to realize that you as a politician and political leader cannot base the validity of someone's violence or suffering based off of their zip code, the color of their skin, the sexual orientation that they have, or the number of figures in their bank account, because in America, we treat everybody equal because they are all human beings. Moving on from that, it's time to look to what kind of America we wish to create. The America that I look to create is an America with specifically two things. One, an America that actually represents what it says it does on paper, and one where gun violence doesn't occur anymore. And one of the best ways of doing that is getting the people that are most at risk for gun violence involved in their local government, to give them hope, to give them representation from their community, from a young person. Because the reason why youth voter turnout is so low across the country is mainly because of two reasons. First off, we don't see people that look like us running for office. Whether that be our age or the color of our skin, oftentimes from the thousands of young people that I've worked with across the country, we want to see change. We want to create change in this country that also needs it, where the young are so oppressed, where over 800,000 families, I will remind you again, don't know where their next meal is going to come from. Many of them have more than 2 children. So that's over 1.6 million children that don't know how they're going to be fed. That's over 1.6 million moms and dads that don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And the best thing that we can do is what we started to do over the past year since the shooting at my high school. Thanks to the work of Mayor Eric Garcetti and Mayor de Blasio, we came together and formed what's known as Mayors for Our Lives, which was a convening of over 200 mayors to come together and work to create youth voter registration drives in their cities. And because of work like theirs and many, hopefully, others in the crowd that I hope will join Mayors for Our Lives in the future, in Florida this year, the voting numbers just came out, and we nearly doubled youth voter turnout for 18 to 29-year-olds. As mayors, I hope that, as leaders, I hope that you recognize that a young person speaking out, don't say that a young person speaking out is not what this country needs. That is far from the truth. Don't write them off as being too naive or too uneducated to create change, because a young person speaking out and other people from previous generations saying that they don't know what they're talking about is not an excuse for them not to be politically involved. That is an excuse to fund their education. Young people, just like every other demographic, need representation within local government. The best way to get young people involved in your local government is to stop writing them off. And stop writing off whatever they're talking about as just plain complaining because they're a young person. Because any person that's talking about an issue that affects them is not complaining. They're talking about an issue that they don't want the next generation to face. And it is our responsibility as people that live in America for the next generation to make sure that the next generation has a better and brighter future than the current one. And the only way that we do that is by fighting for automatic voter registration in our cities. The only way by doing that is making sure that everybody in America, no matter where they come from, no matter whether or not they have the proper identification, is able to go out and vote. As mayors, I encourage every one of you, if you don't have it already, to follow cities like Boston in creating a youth council where young people are able to speak their voice. Or for example, in Los Angeles, where there is a youth task force to talk about gun violence, because we know that the primary groups affected by gun violence have to be the ones to talk about it. And lastly, as mayors, I hope that you understand that approaching gun violence and stopping gun violence is not just stopping mass shootings. Stopping gun violence is stopping every shooting. And one of the best ways of doing that is by going out there and funding violence intervention programs that don't over-police our youth and don't over-incarcerate them and don't make them feel even more isolated from their own community, but use people that have been on similar life tracks of the at-risk youth in your communities to talk to them and stop them from being incarcerated and help work with them to stop gun violence. Because one of the #1 predictors of somebody going out and shooting somebody else within cities is being shot before. So if we don't have people to respond at our hospitals, if we don't have people like Erica Ford in New York City, who have fought for over 17 years to end gun violence in Jamaica, Queens, and in one community, have been able to take that community from 17 murders in 1 year to 1 murder in 17 years, with only a couple $1 million, not only is that morally responsible, that is fiscally responsible. Because it costs states billions of dollars a year to treat preventable gun violence that never should have occurred in the first place. So take a long, hard look at your city and realize that the youth do want to be involved. The only thing preventing them, that may be preventing them, is other people not listening. So go out there and listen, and go out there and fight for your youth. Because the second that we fight for the young men of today and the young women of today is when we create the better politicians for tomorrow that don't shut down the government and starve families. Thank you.